Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. This is Recruit Painting, and in this episode of what I'm painting a Foot Serjeant from the Wargames Atlantic Barons War range. These minis are great to build. There's lots of variety in them. I've built these guys up as Marksmen Serjeants because I needed them for the Grand Melee tournament that was held at Firestorm Games in Cardiff a few weeks back. So I painted them all up, kind of left one aside so I could just show you guys my processes on how I painted these guys up. I use a mixture of paints, some Citadel, some Army Painter and a couple of Vallejo paints, but obviously you can swap these paints out for, you know, similar sort of tones in different ranges. So I've tried to keep them fairly consistent, but also add a bit of variety to them. So when I have a paint out, I tend to put it somewhere else on another miniature, just so that I'm getting the most out of my paints, but also kind of changing up just so they don't look like they're wearing a uniform, but they look like individuals. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I did was prime the model with Ghoul Grey from the Colour Forge, but you could use any sort of lighter tone grey primer if you like. So I'm going to begin by doing the flesh tone first of all. So to start off, I'm going to do a base layer of Cadian flesh tone. There's not actually much flesh visible on this model, it's quite well covered, but for those bits that do show, yeah, they're going to get a thin layer. So that's the face and the hands, so it'll be two thin coats of Cadian flesh tone. So with the layer of Cadian flesh tone, then I go in with Reichland flesh shade, just all over those flesh areas. And again, I'm choosing to do the flesh before I do the kind of the other materials on the model, just because they're mostly kind of hidden away. So the fabrics are kind of raised, so it's easier for me to paint those later on and not touch the skin tones, rather than the other way around. I mean, the hands might be a bit tricky, but yeah, it should be okay. Again, it's a bit messy, but that's absolutely fine, because I'm going to tidy it all up later on anyway. Okay, so whilst the shade is drying, I'm going to paint the trousers in Mechanica Standard Grey. I've used Mechanica Standard Grey on the peasants and the other sergeants that I've painted, just kind of varied the position of where the colour is. So this guy's getting grey trousers. And again, just two thin coats on both legs. Okay, so whilst the Mechanica Standard Grey dries, I'm now going to black out the eyes, and I like to do this now just because it means that when I'm tidying up the face and adding more layer of colour, so I'll be going back in with the Cadian flesh tone in a bit, I can also tidy up the inevitable mistakes that I'm going to make with the eyes. So I fill in the eye area with Vallejo black, matte black, and then yeah, I'll go in with the white once it's dry. So here we go. So with the black now dry, with a more detailed brush, I'm using the Insane Detail brush from the Army Painter. I'm now going to put two white dots in the corners of each eye, so one in each corner of each eye. it's looking a bit messy at the minute, but go back and tidy these up once I go back to the flesh tone colours. Yes. Trust the process. Yeah. I mean, that's how it looked when I did them back in the 2000s, but I am going to tidy that up. Okay, so the next step is that layer of Cadian flesh tone, and also that opportunity to tidy up the messy eyes. So kind of go over the brow there, and it's just kind of making these areas smaller again, so that they resemble eyes. Yeah, just all around the face then, just picking out those raised areas and leaving the shade in the recesses. Okay, so after the layering of Cadian flesh tone over the hands and the raised areas of the face as well, I'm now going to find the like kind of main highlights, so like the tip of the nose, the chin there, the knuckles on the fingers, kind of end of the fingers as well, knuckles on the hands, and yeah, just catch those highlights there. So it's just a dot. There we go. Okay, so next up I'm going to use Strachan Green and paint the hood. So this is where I need to start being careful, not necessarily on the body, and making sure there's no go right up to the edge of the hood fabric, so I don't leave any of that grey sear showing through a little bit later on. And here I'm just going to be really careful, get that edge, just try not to touch the skin, and it'll take a couple of layers of this. Okay, so as the Strachan Green is drying, I'm then going to go in with Fenrisian Grey into the kind of sort of outfit. Don't even know what to call it. Tunic. Underneath his padded tunic. So again, this will get two thin coats. So I need to go back over the Strachan Green as well. Okay, so the next colour that I'm going to put down is Xandri Dust on the crossbow for the wood. Now I saw this scheme on Facebook. I really like the colour that I saw somebody post, and I asked them how they did it. It was really nice, kind of lighter tone wood. So just so that I could vary some of the wood that I had within my army, I've given all my crossbows this sort of shade. So maybe they've all come from the same sort of manufacturer. So yeah, first off, just a base coat of Xandri Dust. Just being careful not to hit the fingers. Of course, it doesn't matter where the metallics are going to be. Okay, so whilst the Tantry dust is drying, the next colour I'm going to use is canvas from the Army Painter for the padded tunic. So again, just 2 thin layers. I'm just being careful now that we've got more colour down on the model, not to try and get it on the other colours. But obviously if it does drift in those spaces, it's not the end of the world, because it is just paint and I can paint over it. And then later I'll shade this and then come back over with a layer of canvas again to really highlight those the texture in the fabric. Okay, so the next colour is boot brown from the Army Painter, and that's for the leather areas, so the boots, the pouch for the bolts there, and the belt. So again, because there's more colours on the model now, I'm just trying to be really careful not to get any other details, so I'm just painting around the fingers really carefully. Okay then, so the next colour that I'm going to put down is a shade of Seraphim Sepia, and that's on the wood of the crossbow. So I'm just going to put that all over the wood on the crossbow, and again on where the metallic areas are going to be, just for that coverage, make sure nothing's missed out. And when it dries, I do really like the wood tone on it. So as I said, this was a scheme that I found. Somebody shared their models on one of the Facebook groups, the Barons War Facebook group, and I really liked it. Okay, so now that the Seraphim Sepia is dry, I'm now going to go in with the metallics, and those metallic areas are on his helmet, that you can see just there obviously, and also the areas of the crossbow, and there is of course his belt buckle. So yeah, metallics next. Let's try and get the camera in focus. So there's this sort of area here, there's the bit where the bolt goes, there's the foot, what do I call that? Well, it's where they put their foot to load the bolt and kind of draw it back. And there's, of course, there's the trigger underneath the crossbow as well. So get all those metallic areas down. Okay, so the metallics are dry, and as I was painting the metallics, I realised that there were some sort of details around the bolts of the bolt pouch there, so I just added some grey cere just to add a bit more colour to that area. So now what I'm going to do is I've got a mix of Nuln Oil and Lamium Medium, so 2 parts Nuln Oil to 1 part Lamium Medium, and I'm just going to give an all over wash except for the areas of the skin and the wood on the crossbow, so the metallics and all of the clothes essentially. So start from the top and just make my way down. Try not to pull it too much. It's just an all over wash really, bar those areas I want to avoid. It really helps the wash with the padding, the padded armour and the folds and creases in the hood. Okay, so now that the non-oil and on medium is dry, I'm now going to start going into layer on the leather areas. So that's the boots, the belt and the bolt pouch. So just with it's the Insane Detail brush, we catch the edges of the pouch. So just catch those edges. And then on the boots and the belt, I'm just going to try and catch some of the raised areas. Okay, so now that the layer of boot brown is on, I'm now going to start looking at layering in canvas by the Army Painter. So I'm going to put it on the highlighted areas and avoid those recesses to keep that depth. So just a thin layer. It's quite easy to do this on the padding because they're so raised. Of course, you can actually just avoid this step, to be perfectly honest. But it's nice just to kind of let it stand out just a little bit. Okay, so next up it's the layer of Fenrisian blue. So just picking out those raised areas again. There's a few creases, so we're just going to pick those out. Then kind of layer around the knee sort of area here, look. Just pick out those raised areas. Okay, so Fenrisian blue is drying, so the next colour that needs layering is Mechanica Standard Grey on the trousers. So same again, just pick out those highlights. I'm going to go up for the knee up here. Try and pick out these creases, kind of like around the shins. Just adds a little bit more depth. Felt like really little effort, really. Again, you can skip it, you can just shade the model and leave it at that. But it just adds that little subtle depth to your model. And with miniatures of like ancients and medieval period, you don't want to go over the top. Well, I mean you can, but I like to keep it quite simple. So I tend not to add too many layers and highlights. I tend to just go over the base colour again over a wash. But I might pick out some things out. Okay, so I thought I'd try something out here. I was going to go for another colour on the brown, just to give it that more leather effect. But I thought, well, I've got canvas on the palette and I've got boot browns, so I've done a 50-50 mix. And I'm going to just pick out some areas, like kind of a bit of uneven sort of highlights, just to give it kind of a worn leather look. I've not done this before, but see how it turns out. So why not put it on all of the leather areas on the model? So it's kind of like, you know, the worn areas. So these bits, kind of at the top of his boots, kind of around the toes as well. which will probably end up getting covered by AK Muddy Ground later anyway. But again, it's just to give it that worn sort of appearance. So it's, you know, it doesn't matter if it's uneven. Try and go for the raised areas, but also some areas that aren't necessarily raised. I'm kind of going all over the place at the minute. There we go. So that's not looking too bad. Yeah, it's a 50-50 mix of the two colours that are on the palette there. There we go. Okay, so I'm finally just going to pick out some of the areas on the corners with Scrag Brown. Again, just to give the leather that worn appearance. And this is as much as I'm going to put. In terms of the leather, so just going to pick out some key sort of areas. And this is the final result. I'm really pleased with how these turned out. I feel like the mixture of colour and kind of spacing it between the models gives them a bit of variety and makes it so they don't necessarily look like they're in a uniform, but they're still cohesive. So I'm really pleased with that. Using the more muted tones again gives that kind of medieval aspect to it, but obviously, you know, true medieval, they wore bright colours, so I tried to reflect that in the colour palette that I used. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. If you do you know, use it in any of your medieval painting, do let me know. I'll be really interested to see what you've painted. You can find me on Instagram under Recruit Painting, and on Facebook as well under Recruit Painting. And do, you know, share your work with me. I'd love to see it. So if you've enjoyed this video, do please like and subscribe, and, you know, let me know that you're enjoying these sorts of videos. I have got more medieval content to do. I've got a few things that I'd like to paint for the channel, but also I've got a few other miniatures from other games ranges that will soon be up, including Conflict 47 and Hell Caesar. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, and see you in the next one.